Hello. This is the Fight Back podcast, hosted by exercise scientist Georgia Very. Here you'll find a series of honest conversations about martial arts and mental health. My guests and I explore the statement that every martial artist has heard: martial arts saved me. How and why do combat sports save people? Listen to find out. Before you get into today's episode, I have a super important favor to ask you. Please either click on this link and check out the more detailed video, or head straight to the GoFundMe page. We're looking to raise money to host an international conference for trauma-informed martial arts in order to create a code of practice, an international best practice standard, so that we can make trauma-informed martial arts accessible around the world. If you listen to this podcast, you already know that martial arts has the power to save lives. We're looking at doing that clinically and on a huge global scale. Okay, I'm talking about getting government funding in various countries, creating teacher training so that new people can become accredited as trauma-informed martial arts instructors, and making this a viable source of therapy for all the people who really need mental health support right now. And after COVID, now is the time to act. Okay, so check out the GoFundMe page or click the video to check out more information to find out what the money's going towards, and also to hear about the challenge that I'm going to be doing in order to motivate everyone to raise this money. And now I'll let you get to today's amazing episode. Everyone, welcome to the Fight Back podcast. I am here today with Neil and Syd, who are clinical psychologists based in England. They are the founders of a program called Fierce Compassion. Neil, Syd, one at a time. Let's go Syd first. Can you introduce yourselves in a bit more detail than that? And yeah, tell us about yourself.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm Syd Hiskey. I'm a clinical psychologist, as you've said. Long time interest in martial arts. So I started with karate many years ago, and then had a period of just self-training really for some while. And then I found Wing Chun Kung Fu, studied that for a long time, then moved into a hybrid system. And now it's Fierce Compassion Martial Arts with Neil. So yeah, that's me.
Neil?
Hi everyone, yes, I'm Neil. I'm a clinical psychologist too, and like Syd, have a long interest in history and martial arts. So I started to train in traditional Taekwando when I was a very young boy, and practiced that for quite a period of time before coming away from it, and then rediscovering it much later in my life. And yeah, doing lots of self-training at the moment, but with the intention of going back to some formal clubs and maybe going to do some Aikido as well. So yeah, really just loving coming back to the martial arts and creating this system that Syd and I have been developing over the last couple of years, Fierce Compassion Martial Arts.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Neil, what is Fierce Compassion?
So Fierce Compassion Martial Arts was born out of sort of many discussions Syd and I had over the years, particularly from when we first met at a conference. Was it at a bar, Syd, or was it over breakfast? I can't remember now, but
it was a bar.
Probably both.
I knew it was going to be a bar.
And we very quickly got into a conversation how we felt that the martial arts had made us not only better people but also better psychotherapists. So we started a conversation way back then about how we might be able to harness that for other therapists to become more compassionate in the therapy space. Under the strong belief, and tied to lots of research that we've looked into and are doing, that makes us much more compassionate and compassionately responsive therapists. So that's a little bit of a flavour about this system. Syd, did you want to add anything to that?
Only to say, yeah, just to echo what you said, it was born out of some really informal conversations, which was great. We just kept coming back to the same theme. Every time we'd meet, it would come back up again. And especially around the idea of how therapists are trained in the body, if you like, to deal with client anger. So we're very good at dealing with some forms of distress, I think, fear and sadness. But when it comes to client anger and how you respond to that in the room as well, it felt like a lot of the training was very, very intellectual, but not really that embodied. And we felt that the link into martial arts allowed us to sit with and be with those kind of experiences in a much, much more therapeutic and probably effective way. So putting those together, and then our interest in research as well, the fierce compassion martial arts agenda, if you like, began to formalize over the last probably 2 or 3 years. So yeah, that's all I'd add to this at the moment.
How does that work then? So a lot of people are probably thinking compassion, martial arts, especially if you're not a martial artist, you might not instantly make the click. But even if you are a martial artist, they maybe don't seem on the surface like they go hand in hand. How do they work together? What are those links?
Oh, where to go with this? This is a big one for us because
How long have you got?
yeah, the term itself, fierce compassion, is a really interesting one because you're right. Typically, compassion's associated with softness, yielding, kindness, soothing, what we would think of as down-regulating or calming a nervous system in the way that a mother might do to a child, that kind of thing. And of course, compassion features all of those elements. So a sensitivity to what's going on in terms of causing somebody to suffer. But we also know compassion's involved in protection as well, sometimes being strident. And there are lots of different terms that have been used for that side of it over the years. And I think the one that we favoured the most is this idea of a fierceness, an embodiment of indignation in a way. Not quite anger as such, but the strength that comes with having the ability to say no, to reduce and halt suffering rather than just soothe, almost in the aftermath of that. So fierce compassion for us seemed to be almost a no-brainer. It seemed to be embedded in the martial arts all the way through, but not something that's ever been talked about in terms of psychology and therapy space, I think. Neil?
And certainly from a therapy perspective, so Syd and I are very passionate about and practice compassion-focused therapy as part of our practice. So if you're interested, anyone listening to the podcast and checking out CFT, there's the Compassionate Mind website that will give you a bit of a flavour of what CFT is about. But it's also on our Fierce Compassion Martial Arts website. There's a nice little section that just summarises what CFT is. But certainly from that perspective, it talks about compassion as an evolved motive. So it's a motivation that turns us towards suffering to engage with it and to wisely respond to it. So really the centrality of compassion from that perspective is about courage. So it's the courage to turn towards and stay engaged with suffering without becoming overwhelmed or overwhelmingly distressed by it, and to take some wise action to halt it, prevent it, alleviate it. So it's really, how do we embody and call up that compassionate courage to take that wise action to alleviate suffering? And that's where martial arts provides us something that and there's lots of stuff that help stimulate that in us, that motivation. But we're very keen on this idea that martial arts, it really is a radically embodied compassion practice. So there's not many other arenas where you can stay engaged with the level of threat and distress that martial arts provides you. You know, in safe combat in the dojo, there's so many qualities of compassion associated with that process, about being able to stay tolerant of your own and others' distress, to read other people, to respond in a way that's not harmful, that's helpful, so to cause minimum harm as possible, always with the intention of stopping and alleviating suffering. So that's where we would see martial arts as being really, really helpful, not only just in the therapy space, but in life. You know, that idea that we train in the martial arts not to fight, that's a means to an end. This is a quote from a really lovely book by Roy Carmen called Karate Beneath the Surface. He says this, he says, you know, the purpose of karate is not to learn to fight, that's a means to an end. It's to become a fearlessly compassionate human being. So that's the ultimate, this is the way to become a fiercely, courageously compassionate human being.
How does that link in? Sorry. Oh, that's quite loud. I was going to say, let's link it back to the core theme of this podcast then. People say karate saved my life, right? All the time you hear people saying that. How does that tie in with the compassion piece? Do you think it's because of that? Do you think there are other things that are going alongside that? What has been your experience with that kind of sentiment that you hear from people?
Ooh, well, I'd say the short answer to that, I've been thinking about this in a way, and the short punchy answer to that is karate and martial arts generally have allowed me to get in touch with things that have caused me significant distress in my life, stay with them and work with them to try and reduce them. And in doing so, that's changed the course of my life. So saved my life, no, but certainly shaped my life, definitely, without doubt. For me, very briefly, early experiences of watching things like Kung Fu on television when I was a really small kid, the TV series, etc. And this idea that you could have somebody walking around, being around in the world who were deeply caring about other people and yet would stand up for others in a really effective way as needed, dramatized in a TV show, of course, just awoke something in me which was really powerful. I'd just never seen these two things put together in a way. Traditional kind of views of masculinity and strength at that point were just about hard men. There was no kind of softer or more caring side associated with that. So to see those two things put together, for me, strength within, compassion for what this has all been about. And personally, again, it's allowed me to get in touch with my own insecurities, fears, doubts, etc., and work through those through the medium of martial arts, as Neil says, conflict, but also resolution in the same space as well. It's not just about the conflict that we have in the dojo, the fight, whatever it might be. It's the respect afterwards, what we would call the reaffiliation. So, Neil, your thoughts on that?
Oh, very, very similar. I think martial arts has really helped me in life change the way that I deal with struggle and pain. I think it can give you a fabulous way to change your relationship with pain and suffering because of the embodied compassionate elements. How you deal with struggle, how you persist in the face of very scary and very, very frightening things in a way that's not just about being physically tough. It allows you to, like you were saying, Syd, it's allowed me to approach and open to things that are quite frightening and quite scary, and to be able to work with that, tolerate it, and find a way through it. And there's so much wrapped in training and about the whole process of training with other people in the midst of a struggle, in that affiliation that you get in being helped to turn towards things that are difficult, and to be helped through that by other people that you train with, and to survive those things and flourish in the face of those things. I always hold on to that idea that martial arts has helped me develop an indomitable spirit. That idea that no matter what happens in life, at a really deep embodied level within me, nothing can destroy me. So that's not a head thing. That's a deep body in my guts and heart experience that it's given me that in life. So no matter what slings and arrows come my way, it doesn't mean they don't hurt, but that cannot destroy my essence and my spirit. I can survive that and grow and learn from that, and use that as a strength for myself and for other people.
Yeah, if I can do a poor job, but a job nonetheless, at summarizing what you've all said, then I think what I take away from speaking to you both is that compassion is a difficult thing to do sometimes. And it seems like the key to having skills in life to cultivate resilience, to be able to handle things that come your way, and also to thrive, is to be able to sit with uncomfortable things. And sometimes being compassionate is uncomfortable. Sometimes continuing training is uncomfortable. There are all these things, but it seems to come back to, how do you as a person manage when things are difficult? And do you lean towards the difficult things and do them straight away and seek them out, or do you avoid the difficult things? And it just seems like martial arts provides the community, the structure, and the way to embody that. How would that be as a summary?
That's a very good
superb.
especially the bit about community as well. This is the thing. I think for us, it's fierce compassion, especially, is a coming together thing. Sometimes people ask us about it and ask for papers and things, and we always say, well, you need to come and train with us. We need to actually, you know, lay hands on each other. So it's the sort of, again, it's this idea of going into conflict, there being a struggle with that, coming back out, but still staying in a safe space between the two of you that you can reaffiliate. And obviously sparring lessons and things where you might move around many partners in a lesson is a really good way of training with people who might be less skilled than you, way more skilled, and having to keep adjusting all the time to the interaction between the two of you that could cause some kind of hostility or physical blow, whatever it might be, and managing that in real time. That's the kind of essence of what we're interested in, that seems to map so well to some of the processes that go on within psychotherapy as well. So you've got this rich dynamic and flow of compassion all the time between people. Fierce compassion is just one representation of that, really.
What does that look like in terms of the program that you run? I think you ran one program before COVID kind of stopped everything with practitioners. As a bit of an overview, what did that look like when you're working with psychotherapists?
So we're a really pan-style driven system. So although Syd and I, you know, we come from, we have our specific interest in training within the martial arts. So mine's Taekwondo, Syd's is Wing Chun. But I mean, Syd's trained in a broader range of stuff than me. But we sort of try and integrate lots of different principles from different martial arts, because in the spirit of doing what works and what's effective. So in the workshops for therapists, there's loads of embodied experiential exercise. So we do lots of dynamic and static stance work, so that you can use that as a way to center yourself before you enter a session. So that includes like how you set your intention. So that might be like some kind of salute, or getting into a ready stance, and then so imagining setting our intention before we arrive at a session and centering ourselves so that we arrive in a state of emotional preparedness to engage with the motivation to be helpful and not harmful. So we'll take people through some initial stance work and some breathing exercises to get us into that state, and then we'll start to use a few exercises to make it more dynamic. So, you know, how do we stay centered and compassionately responsive when somebody's directing something at us in the therapy space, right? Because therapy is an act of courage on both parties, right? Both the people who come, you know, they're being incredibly courageous in exposing themselves and sharing their vulnerabilities. We've also got to be able to engage with that and respond in the most helpful way. So we have a couple of drills where we'll get people to be perhaps a client who's directing some anger towards you, and instead of responding in an unhelpful way to that, we'll guide people through some blocks so that they can stay with, absorb what's coming their way, and not be reactive, and roll with that, what's sometimes called resistance in psychotherapy. And then once they've been through a sequence of responding to that with, say, some blocks, we'll get them, instead of offering a counter attack, we'll get them to embody a compassionate counter. So to invite them to respond. Once you've been able to roll with that resistance, what do you then offer back towards somebody? So it's not an attack, it's a compassionate counter. There's lots of ways throughout the workshop that we try and help people embody that and experience that. So it's this process of how do you bring that to then a therapy process, so you get a feeling for what it's like at a really somatic and embodied level, and then how do you transfer that to the therapy space and therapeutic encounters. It's giving you the inner resources to respond in that way in the therapy space. So you take what you learn in the dojo and transfer it to the therapy room. So it's the process that they call somatic metamorphosis. So did you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to chip in, if only to say, remember, Georgia, as well, for the guys that we're working with, the vast majority may have had an interest in martial arts, but many wouldn't have done anything like this at all. So to get them to really sit with their own experience of somebody's going to very gently throw a punch at you now, or a strike of some sort, you see this look of terror and this kind of sitting back within the self that happens, of course. And it's being able to sit with that. How can you more skillfully respond than your just visceral gut reaction to it, your kind of untrained response, if you like. So all the time getting people to be mindful, if they can, about their response. And as Neil says, rather than something that's harmful in reply, we might do something that's a simultaneous block and counter, which redirects the other person's energy, but also halts them in the spot as well. So like a palm strike to the hip or something like that roots somebody into the floor. And then of course we get people to switch around. So they then have to essentially deliver a strike to someone else or go towards a strike for the other. And in psychotherapy process, sometimes there is anger from the therapist towards the client as well. So we get people to think about, okay, what would be a more helpful response in terms of that flow as well. The only other things I would add to this as well, later on in the workshop, we'd normally introduce some kind of heavier striking. And again, for a lot of people, that's really quite powerful. And we'll start bringing in a ki or some kind of shout as well, with real intention to hit a pad or whatever it is. I'm sure that speaks to your own experience and the works that you do too, but that really seems to unlock something in a lot of people. And it's one of the best received elements of the workshop as well. People just really like that. So it's a
really nice way to experiment with the power of your compassion. Sometimes, so ki-ing is a really nice way to play with that, because you can when does it need to be softer and more gentle, and when does it need to be that have that really fierce quality? It's like Bruce Lee said, if I'm going to punch, I'm going to punch. And if you transfer that to compassion, if you're going to be compassionate, sometimes it's got to be full force, right?
Yeah.
Wow. I love not just for psychotherapists, right? For anyone to reflect and think about how often in martial arts you're responding emotionally. And it can be in any martial art, in jiu-jitsu, in like a grappling art as well, not just in a striking art where somebody maybe submits you, or somebody, gets one up on you, or you feel some hostility coming towards you, or you interpret hostility. Maybe there's not even any there. And the gut response just to throw it back at people, but to instead think, how do I either do a redirect or a compassionate response? Which, as you were speaking, I was thinking, oh, what would a compassionate response be? I was like, does everyone just block and then hug the other person? Is that usually a compassionate response?
No, and that's the thing. And
we
I
have
suppose,
had that.
Yeah. Sometimes, but it's interesting to invite people to experiment, because something we look at in the workshop, and certainly within the compassion world in psychotherapy, compassion looks very different depending on the context. So it really depends. It's not always going to be, it looks like a hug. That sometimes it might be very halting, and then you reaffiliate. So it really depends. It really does depend. But always with the motivation to do something that's halting of suffering and alleviating and preventing it. So it may look slightly different, and it's an invitation to think about, well, what's needed in this moment? What is a compassionate response? And rather than getting stuck in our heads, to get into the body and be guided by the wisdom of what we call our compassion itself. How does it know what to do in this moment?
Forgive me for wanting to jump in there, just to say that what a lot of this is about, feeling safe enough while still essentially within contact range. Now you've redirected somebody to somewhere else, to then take the time, even if it's only a moment, to think, what do I most need to do? What does the other person most need at this point? Do you really get a moment of meeting or connection together in that space? And sometimes with some folk, we've found it's no more than just looking at the other person, just sitting and being together. And it sort of dissolves some of this conflict that can happen. So it can be something really pro-social and affiliative, a hug, eye contact, a smile, some signal that actually it's okay. You don't need to do this. It's okay. And it
reminds me of, just sorry, Sid, to jump in as well. And I've experienced that in therapeutic encounters. It's that principle of, I won't fight you, but I will respond to your fear with compassion, right? So I can be with you in this. I can be with this, and I'm not going to fight you. I'm going to help you, right? I'm not going to respond with hostility in the way that part of you expects me to.
Yeah.
I'm still here after you've directed all of this to me, and then that can drop away. But you have to be able to stay there and absorb a lot in a way that doesn't destroy you either or the other. So it gives you that ability to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I think to be able to apply that moment, to be able to say, you know, we're in this close space and it feels like you need to give an instantaneous reaction because it feels like stakes are high or whatever that might be. And you can translate that into your everyday life and think, you know, at home, in the house, where somebody fires off a snarky comment because they've had a bad day and you instantly fire off an even nastier comment straight back because you're in default responsive mode. And how well, you know, even I know a lot of martial artists, and I wonder how many of us, we get good at it, but how often do we practice it too? I think it's great to have these conversations and think, you know, I have all these great skills. Am I using them all the time? Am I being in that martial way in my real, in quotation marks, life, you know? Or also, am I stepping on the mat when I step into my treatment room or when I step into my house? You know, I bow when I step onto the mat and I really embody a very respectful person. Or can I bow when I step into my kitchen or into, you know, where everybody else is in the house or into my office or wherever it might be, and then choose to become a more respectful, responsive person? It's just like, yes, that's what you guys are saying, right?
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, beautifully put. You're better at this than we are. Yeah, that's really well put. It takes us, like Neil was saying about motivations, it takes you from a different mindset into one where we're going to have conflict and some kind of threat now. You're going to hurt me and I'm going to hurt you back. And then it can take us into something where we're going to compete then, who's the more skillful. But really we want to shift from that into something that's much more about how can we be collaborative? And you can still do that in a very martial way. You can train really hard to each other, and the idea that you're helping improve each other. And we've talked about this so many times. The best martial artists we've seen, not just in terms of their skill, but the most rounded martial artists seem to embody all of that. They can go up and down through those gears when they need to. But their default seems to be, with years of training, somebody that's, again, there's less of a separation between their martial self and their other self. It comes together much, much more. And as Neil said at the top, you know, the kind of Kamen book, that's where we're headed with this. Just trying to reduce the separation between my therapist self, my martial self, and my other self. Just trying to get more kind of triangulation between the three of those.
To be more integrative. That's the thing. That, you know, martial arts. There's a lovely quote from a really classic Aikido book by Westbrook and Ratty. I think it's from the 70s. Brilliant book. And they start off by saying, you know, Aikido is a discipline of coordination and integration. You're integrating body and mind, and that includes those reducing that separation between our different selves, so that we bring more of our martial self into different domains of our life. So this a nice discipline of coordination and integration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Syd really summed it up in that one phrase, like, what do I need in this moment? Because even if you keep the emphasis on yourself, if you think, what do I need in this moment? If you're the much better opponent, you know, if you're fighting with someone who's at a lesser experience, do you need to win in this moment? Does that help you in any way? Well, maybe am I going to get more out of teaching them and reframing what I'm doing in a way where they can see what the strategy is? And then if it goes the other way, if I'm the much lesser opponent, well, what do I need in this moment? Am I going to get anything from really trying to jump up to their level and probably then getting hurt? And the same thing when we jump to a competitive nature in our day-to-day interactions. Do I win if I win the argument? What do I win by accomplishing that? And I think taking like that, being able to take that moment to say, what do I need right now, is just so, so powerful. And it's something people listening can really take away. And even if you practice it a little bit and then forget all about this podcast, then maybe when you go to training, you'll notice it more at training. And then again, like we said, become a more integrated person where you notice it at least at training and then can start to apply it otherworldly.
And that question really gets us to, like you beautifully said, Georgia, that the need bit, it gets us more towards a win-win for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a real fight, everyone loses.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times from so many really good people I've come across and trained with over the years. Everybody says you don't win with violence, aggression, you know, everybody suffers. You might feel you've won in the short term, but you really haven't. There's a cost to this. So the fierce martial arts stuff is engaging with the motivation to want to keep yourself safe, but also extend that to wanting genuinely to keep the other person safe too. And in conveying that to them, what that then allows them to do as they begin to stand down and feel that they don't need to continue this hostility. And that's where you get this moment, as I said, of what do we both need? How are we going to work through this? And that's really what compassion is. We're just bringing the fierceness to it in the arena at which you might do that when it can feel probably most needed, most scary. You know, as we know, fighting's hard, it's scary, it's tough, it's difficult for loads of different reasons. And it should be a challenge sometimes too. So we're trying to harness all of that. And I know that's a lot. And we're trying to do that in a short series of workshops, ideally for therapists, but there's no reason in principle that given enough development time, this can't also be rolled out for probably initially client anger or certainly members of the general public as well. And not anger management as such, but ways in which we engage with anger more skillfully. So there's lots of ways that this could go. Therapists are a ready audience for us. We're very interested in that world, and we think our conversations with folk over the last few years have shown that there is a real appetite for this kind of training, we think, as well.
And certainly, Georgia,
Yeah.
I know your interest in trauma-informed martial arts. I think this is a really fruitful avenue for people who've experienced interpersonal trauma, not without its challenges, but I think this can give people, you know, really loads of internal resources to heal from interpersonal trauma. So, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that research is sort of to come. But I think, you know, some of the things that I've just learned from speaking to you previously and today is just we don't think enough how difficult it is to be a therapist and the kind of skills that you need to have, and that, you know, for anyone going to therapy, that you're working with another human too, and that they're having struggles too, and, you know, we're just kind of throwing things at people really a lot of the time. And I think that the work that you're doing therefore is incredibly powerful. But then also, I think even on this show, we talk a lot about how martial arts translates to life. And I think you guys really bring another perspective to that, which again is really important for people. And I think that, like I said, that what do I need right now? Those moments of pausing before stepping on the mat, stepping into a space, and pausing before taking a response are just really critical life skills that you're both leading the way in helping people develop through martial arts training. It's fantastic. How do people...
Thank you for,
I was going to say,
sorry.
make sure you talk about yourselves. How do people get onto your next workshop? I know it's very difficult over there with the pandemic and everything, but what are the plans? Will there be online versions, anything like that?
Well, as it stands, it really depends on what happens with lockdown. But if it all sort of goes to plan over here, which is sort of end of June, we are hoping in October at the annual International Compassion Focused Therapy Conference, which will be in Edinburgh this year, if it goes ahead, to be running a workshop there. It'll be a blended workshop with some lovely people who are embodied yoga practitioners as well. So it will blend martial arts and yoga, but particularly to think about harnessing and developing therapist courage. But after that, I can't give you any dates yet because of everything that's going on. But we are planning to have a 2-day workshop in Bristol in the not too distant future. So that will probably be either the end of the year or early next year, maybe towards spring. So that you can keep an eye on that by going to our website, which is www.fiercecompassionmartialarts.com, and we'll be posting training dates there. So if you want to check that out and keep an eye on that, you can. Syd and I normally occasionally put out a bit of a newsletter as well. So if you sign up to our mailing list on the website, you can find out that way. We'll send out a frequent newsletter where we'll update people about dates and training. So check that out if that's an interest.
Yeah, perfect. We'll put all the details to that in the show notes so people can click through, get onto the mailing list if they are interested in that kind of work. And then otherwise, who knows what the one day long future will hold. I'm sure there's people from overseas that are very interested in this. So when people can travel for professional development, I'm sure there'll be huge interest in doing your programs. But it has been my absolute pleasure to have you both on the show. I've learned so much, and I think this is a really useful resource as an episode for people that they can dive right into as skills to start practicing even without having done your program just as yet. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgia.
Have you thought of something to be grateful for today? What was it? I'm grateful for the amazing women that train with me at the Fight Back Project. I'm grateful for Nari and the beautiful song Shape Me, which is heard at the beginning and end of every episode. And I'm grateful for you, for listening to this show and helping martial arts keep saving lives. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you'd like to like and subscribe, well, that's a bonus.
You need to know that nobody shapes me but me. Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. I fear nothing, no complacence. Walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight above his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one that power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. Meets, we're so glad you came and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you were badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well. Take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well. Now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny for my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it, huh?